you got some news on Iran to start off today. So, what's going on with thoughts and everything else surrounding the Iran issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start with I got some good news as far as Iran's relationship with Saudi Arabia and some of their regional diplomacy. So the Iranians have reopened their Organization of Islamic Cooperation office in Jeddah, which is a coastal city in Saudi Arabia. It's a 57 member organization. Um, and their office in Jeddah has been closed for 6 years following breakdown in relations, diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. But now we talked about this, I think, around our episode we did around Christmas time about how they were getting visas from Saudi Arabia. But now Saeed Khatibzadeh, the foreign ministry spokesman, has announced that they have arrived. They got their visas and they're currently engaging in efforts to reopen the office. But what's even better, as far as everything in terms of the improved relations between Riyadh and Tehran is uh, he also said that, quote, the Islamic Republic of Iran is also ready to reopen its embassy in Saudi Arabia. But he added that this would hinge on, quote, practical efforts by the kingdom. But beyond that, since April, last year, Baghdad has been brokering a series of talks. There were four rounds between Tehran and Riyadh. And they say that now preparations are currently underway for the fifth round. And I believe this is Hossein Amir Abdollahian speaking to Al Jazeera, the Iranian foreign minister. He says, quote, I believe the Saudi side is interested in talks on some regional issues as well, but our negotiations for now are focused on bilateral issues and on when to return relations to a normal state. And he also said that the two will need to engage in, quote, close dialogue to resolve regional issues in the long term. But I think again, with as far as them continuing to rebuild relations with states like even the UAE, and as we're seeing more and more of the Gulf states and regional rivals. Beyond that, like the Turks speaking with the Emiratis and the Saudi and UAE lifting the blockade on Qatar and rebuilding relations there. We're seeing a lot of positive developments, and probably the most important one, of course, is Riyadh and Tehran. All right. So now we're talking more about the JCPOA stuff and the prospects for a U.S. return to the deal. As basically anything you read right now, you're going to see that they're saying that basically a decision will be made here very soon, like in the coming weeks. A lot of things you read, they'll say that early February is when we're going to start to hear some concrete decisions being made. It's either phrased in an optimistic way, as I'll show from, was it Joseph Borrell, the European foreign policy, the EU foreign policy chief. He'll say things like, "Oh, we're getting very close. I think we're going to reach a deal in the next few weeks. I'm very optimistic." And he says things like, "I was pessimistic back before Christmas." And that's, basically my analysis here on the show as we've been covering it is around that time it started to appear after that seventh round of talks that the Iranians really did have the upper hand and that negotiations were continuing on the basis of their proposals. And that, that are basically the idea is that they want a full implementation of the JCPOA and full sanctions relief. But now we're hearing now that the Americans this is where I get a little bit pessimistic. Unfortunately, is because the Americans are basically saying there's this report in Axios that Dave DeCamp reports on here at antiwar.com about basically the Americans are saying that a decision is indeed coming in coming weeks, or they'll be making the decision here soon, and that they're going to one way or the other blame Trump for whatever the decision ultimately ends up being. And the reason that's bad, of course, is because So basically they're saying is like either they'll return to a deal and the U.S. will re-enter the JCPOA, or the talks will fail and they'll ramp up Trump's maximum pressure campaign, which for all intents and purposes has been continued. And in some cases, obviously the Biden administration has imposed further sanctions on Iran. So and I don't really see them returning to the deal and going – I mean, I'd like to think that that's what they do and say like, well, Trump put us in this situation and Iran had advanced their nuclear program. And what were we going to do? Just leave, the status quo as is. But now we have to return to the deal. I suppose you could make that argument if you wanted to, but it's more likely I mean, Blinken recently gave an interview where he reiterated some of this rhetoric. As Dave points out here, Ned Price, shortly after this article came out from Axios, explaining the sort of PR strategy they were about to embark on, he basically debuted it at a press conference where he goes, it's worth spending just a moment on how we got here. It's deeply unfortunate that because of an ill-considered or perhaps unconsidered decision by the previous administration, this administration came into office without the stringent verification and monitoring protocols that were in place. Now, and Blinken has been making statements about how we're running out of time to return to the deal. He has said things that are better than we've come to expect from Blinken in the last couple of months since talks restarted. Ordinarily, he's saying like, all options are on the table and this kind of thing. Now, he's still saying that, but he is also saying that if they do return to a deal, that would be the best thing for U.S. I think he said for U.S. national security. But he does, then again, he says things about how they're reaching enough visual material for a bomb and we're coordinating with our allies and we're going to have to basically look to other options and this sort of thing. So it's better on the scale of what Blinken's been saying, but it's not encouraging through the lens of, are we really going to reach a deal? Because the truth is, as we'll talk about here as we go further, the Iranians are seeking, guarantees on verifications of sanctions relief and guarantees that the U.S. won't leave the deal again. But we know that when they say they're going to blame Trump, the thing is, as it's becoming a little bit more unclear if Biden's going to be reelected. I doubt it. And so if it's a Republican, which it probably will be, in that case, there's no way the JCPOA survives. So the Iranians are in a very bad a bad situation here anyway. And so I don't really see how they could, the Biden administration could return to the deal and just use Trump as like the excuse, because they can't even count on Democrats truly supporting the JCPOA. There's still a lot of hawkish Democrats who are against it. Now, House Republicans just sent a letter to Biden, more than 100 congressmen, saying that Biden should end the talks right now and strongly enforce the existing sanctions on Iran and immediately withdraw from these fruitless Vienna talks. Now, as Dave points out here at antiwar.com, that the Republicans are using all the horrible rhetoric of the Americans basically between the 29th when talks restarted and just before Christmas when Ned Price came out and for the first time said, we're making modest progress. Again, which is like, it was a big deal because they hadn't said anything positive up to that point. You heard positive things from the Russians and the Iranians and even Enrique Mora, the EU coordinator, but you didn't hear it, from the Americans. And even have heard some positive things from the French now since that happened or around the same time. So they're saying you should withdraw now, and they're saying basically that they're pointing to the administration's rhetoric before Christmas time, and they're saying, what's the quote? Administration officials' recent statements about the Vienna talks have made it clear that there is no diplomatic path forward at this time. And so, again, this is highlighting the difficulties that Biden is going to have returning to the JCPOA one way or another. There's, the Republicans are virtually entirely against it. So there's a report that came out in Reuters that talks about how the Americans and the Iranians are at odds over guarantees for sanctions, the scope of sanctions relief and guarantees that the Americans will stay in the deal, as I just mentioned, and then the verification period that we've talked about before. And it's becoming more clear that the Iranians are saying they need at least a few well, not at least, but they want a few weeks to, I would say they should probably, push for more, but they're saying a few weeks to verify sanctions relief to make sure that they get, what's promised to them, which has been they haven't received even during the Obama administration. It was, they didn't get the full sanctions relief, and sanctions were even imposed the day the deal was signed. So, you can totally understand where they're coming from. The Americans are apparently telling them that they should only be a few days, which I wouldn't, that's that promise isn't worth much. Then also we have Western diplomats telling Reuters that early February is a realistic end date for the Vienna talks. And another Western diplomat says it's not really clear if Iran wants a deal anyway. But the Iranian official that's interviewed says that, quote, Americans should give assurances that no new sanctions under any label will be imposed on Iran in the future. We need guarantees that America will not abandon the deal again. Let's see. There's also some other quotes I'll get into here from the Iranians. It's not in this particular article, I believe, but they are saying things like there are no insurmountable issues, but that they sense that the Americans are stalling the talks because they have basically political liabilities, it sounds like. In fact, I'll just jump to that really quick. That's one of the more recent articles. They're saying that the U.S. is stalling the Vienna talks. The quote is Saeed Khatasbeda says that if the U.S. lifts sanctions, they can reach a lasting, reliable agreement at a good pace. He also said that negotiations are going in the right direction, but we have no unresolvable negotiations are going in the right direction. We have no unresolvable impasses, but he is saying that there are crucial differences left in Vienna. Most importantly, the disproportionate speed of the opposing parties, especially the U.S., in the discussion of lifting sanctions. That talks are subject, to political decisions that have been stalled by the other side. All right. So I already talked about this, but Joseph Borrell, the EU official, the foreign policy chief, is saying we're arriving at the end of a long process. There's a better atmosphere since Christmas. Today, I believe we're reaching an accord is possible. This could come in where he said we might reach a deal in the coming weeks. He made these comments in France alongside the French foreign minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, who said that he had the opposite approach. He's saying that things are going much too slowly to be able to reach a result. And also Borrell said he still holds out hope that the JCPOA can be revived and, quote, function as it did before the American withdrawal. And let's see. So we also have Naftali Bennett speaking with Putin and telling him that that the world powers involved in the Vienna talks need to take a strong stance and stand against Iran's progress in the nuclear project. What do we expect from Naftali Bennett? But what I do have here is that Mikhail Ulyanov, the Russian envoy in Vienna, says that last week on Thursday, they met with the JCPOA participants met with the American representatives and discussed, quote, the implementation of a future deal. He says, we need to agree on who will be doing what and when on the way towards the full restoration of the nuclear deal. That's not an easy task. He said that on Twitter. And then, let's see. So we have, I already covered the stuff that Blinken was saying, just basically making threats, saying that we're getting very close, that we're very, very short on time. The runway is very short. And like I said, he's making the nuclear bomb threat. They have enough visual material for a nuclear weapon, or they're getting close to it. But he does, like I said, say it's the best result for America's security. And again, he's highlighting that this is one of the worst decisions ever made when Trump left the deal. And that's essentially it. We're at this kind of we're getting closer and closer to things going one way or the other. The Iranians want a legal pledge from the Americans because they know that it's impossible to get for a treaty to be ratified. It has to be they need 2/3 of the Senate, and that'll be impossible with the situation with the Republicans. And like I said, the Democrats are unreliable too. But the report in the Wall Street Journal about this cites unnamed diplomats who say that this guarantee demand appears to be, quote, a paramount political objective for Raisi.
So, Connor, if the Iranians, I'm sure, are able to access the U.S. Constitution and are able to understand U.S. politics, at least enough to know that it seems almost impossible that this thing would get ratified as a treaty, right? And so if they're not asking for the U.S. to ratify it as a treaty, I don't see any reason why the Biden administration just wouldn't agree to whatever legal guarantee they want. It's not like if the U.S. makes a legal guarantee and then, you know, there's some kind of financial penalties. We'll have to live up to it and pay the Iranians those financial penalties. I mean, you know, we just ignore international law whenever the hell we want. And so if they're not asking for the U.S. to, like, you know, do a treaty thing, then I don't understand why this is even a sticking point for the Americans. Just agree to it. And if it falls apart when the Republicans in office, then it's not your problem. I mean, that's essentially what Obama did with the deal. And so it just, especially with them now acknowledging how poor of a decision it was by Trump to withdraw from the deal, it makes absolutely no sense to me why they just wouldn't agree to the Iranian demands, because they're not that extreme and completely achievable. But you know,
Yeah.
that's not the administration that we currently have.